evening, everyone, on the MYBC Consulting Facebook page. It's Tuesday evening, so that must mean it's time for another edition of the MYBC the MYBC Virtual Bookstore Author Series. You know, it's where I bring authors, editors, illustrators. Soon I'm going to have a ghostwriter coming up to talk about what it looks like to work with a ghostwriter when you want to write a book. I've had book agents on. So this is all about being our creative selves and supporting each other in our creative beings. And this particular lovely author, I happen to have met at the Fort Langley Jazz and Arts Festival. She was introduced to me by Lucia Stieg, our director on the board for the festival as well, our art director. And she, when I went down to where all the art was in the festival, the 2 days, she said, "Gotta meet this lady. She's gotta meet this lady. She's like, does art, and she also has written a book." And I'm like, I'm there. So welcome, Christine, to my
Thank you very much, Jeanette.
And we're kind of neighbors because you live in Fort Langley.
I do.
Yes. So Christine, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to get into the title of your book.
Well, do you want me to talk about the title, or do you want me to...
A little bit about your history. So a little bit about, like, where are you from? What have you done in your life?
It's all in the book, but I was born in England during the end of the war, towards the end of World War II. And as was my husband, and the book is about both of us. I met him, and this is again what the book is about. I met him when I was kicked out of my digs for frightening the landlady. I was reading scary novels. I was 16 years old. I was spooked. I went running into her room screaming, and she had a nervous breakdown, so justifiably kicked me out. Christopher and I were working in the same store. I was working at 16 because my parents had left me in England while they were living in the Middle East, in Aden. So I went into the store, and I'd love to say that I had a little stick over my shoulder with a red dotted handkerchief and all my belongings and that, but I actually had a little cardboard suitcase that I lugged in there. And somebody said, "What's with the suitcase?" I said, "Well, I've been kicked out of my digs. Does anybody have anywhere I could bunk down?" And they all said they'd just listen out that day. And I wasn't too worried because the manager of the store was a sweet old guy who said I could stay in the staff room if necessary. Anyway, at the end of the day, Christopher said, "Come home with me. My mum will put you up." I'd heard great things about this tyrant of a mother of his. And I thought, oh, well, she doesn't even know me. And so it was a 30-minute bus ride to his home. He cycled behind the bus and said, I'll be right behind you. He looked like an Olympian. He was pedaling away like crazy, and I'm sitting on the bus watching him. Walked me down the road. He didn't knock on the door. He opened the door and he said, "Hey, Mum, this is Christine. She's got nowhere to stay." And I remember his mum, Grace, looking me up and down, giving that eyed, and she said, "She better come in then. She can sleep with the girls." And that's what I did, slept with his sisters for the next 6 months. But the reason I was on my own, before I got to that point, I had a crazy mum, bless her heart, loved her dearly, but she was a bit of a nutcase, and certainly marched to the beat of her own drummer. So she was always trying to save a bit of money. Dad was always away on a contract, some contract or the other, sometimes taking him away for 2 years at a time. And she would do anything to save a bit of money. So she had a habit of getting these winter lets, as they called them in England. And that was taking in the winter somebody's house, somebody's summer house.
Okay.
And we lived in some really peculiar places. So I talk about those places, and I talk about she decided that Spain was probably going to be the cheapest place to live, and off we went to Spain and lived there for a while. But before that, I had gone to West Africa to join my dad, where he was working in a diamond mine, which I now realize was, oh, anyway, it was a different time. It was, we
Mhm.
didn't know the political incorrectness, if you like, of stealing some other country's
Mm.
resources like that. But even at that age, at 13, I used to think, how can this be right?
Mhm.
Anyway, Dad was a surveyor over there. He took me off to these places deep in the jungle. And at one village, I was fated so well because I was the first white female they'd seen. Now, at 13 years old, I was a stick.
Mm.
And they were very curious because the village girls were, shall we say, a lot more developed than I was at 13. Some of them were married. And they poke me and prod me, this is a woman. So that was quite an adventure, and I write about that too in my book. And
I'm gonna get you to pause there for a second, because there's so much good stuff, as they say in the interview world, that to unpack. First of all, the title of your book is what? And then I'm gonna
it's
ask you a
called
couple of,
The Choirboy and the Belly Dancer.
and the subtext underneath that.
It's called An Enduring Love Story, and it's an unlikely love story. It's not as lurid as the title sounds or as the cover would indicate. Um, Christopher was a choir boy in his childhood. He
Mm-hmm.
was he was a boy soprano, sang solo even in St Paul's Cathedral in London, and that was sort of a pivotal part of his life. The belly dancer bit comes when I left the shop that I met him in at 17 because my parents called me over to join them finally
Mm-hmm.
um, in the Middle East. And that's where, again, pivotal part of my life, I became a belly dancer, except it wasn't really a belly dancer. It was more spontaneous dancing, but I was billed as Christina, the English belly dancer.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
Oh
The
my goodness.
fame was incredible. Very short lived because there were all sorts of things that, I mean, my parents were dead against it. Well, my dad was dead against it, and Mum talked him into um, letting me do it because she had a charity. She had started a school
Mm.
for women, immigrant women who came in from Djibouti and places like that to try and get jobs. And rather than beg on the street, she started a school that trained them in domestic science. So she
Oh,
said, "Oh,
I just want us to pause just for a second. That is probably the coolest way I've ever heard the term housekeeper. Domestic science.
science." Yes.
That is fantastic. I think there'd be a lot more people that would get help wanted signs, or help, or if they posted that people are looking for domestic science. I had to pause there for a second because that was fantastic.
A domestic scientist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How to cure your house of dust bunnies and wash your dishes
Absolutely.
sparkling clean. Oh my gosh, that
That's
is
right.
just
There's a
incredible.
science. A science to it.
A science to it. I wish I
So,
had science. I don't.
so this was Mum's pet project. And she said, what if Christina put all her money that she earns into that charity? So reluctantly, Dad agreed. But should I perhaps, Jeanette, tell you about how this whole thing came about?
Well, that was going to be my next question. Is why did you feel you needed to capture your life story, yours and Christopher's life story in a book to be put on a shelf or shared out with the world? Why? Why write a book? And what did that journey look like for you kind of from start to finish?
Well, why did I do it? Because I wanted, I'm, I'm sort of, next year I'm going to be 80. So my grandchildren,
Fantastic.
thank you. My grandchildren see us as old people. Obviously we are. I'm also a little bit handicapped because I wrote about the syndrome that I've got in the book. So it means that I need a walker now. I mean, it's a progressive disease. I hate that word progressive. It's actually regressive in my opinion. But it means that my mobility gets worse and worse. And I thought, this isn't me. This isn't me. This isn't Christopher. We've had these incredible lives. Now, the book only takes us up to 1972, when we'd arrived in Canada as newlyweds and we bought our first house. We even separated when we got here and got back together again. And the whole thing is that early part of our lives is it's all about how love overcomes everything.
Wait, I just got chills when you said that.
Yeah, even a history of belly dancing. So we had become an item after I stayed with him in his house. I mean, we weren't to start with, just friends. And then gradually, after a couple of months, the romance kicked in. And we had to say goodbye because after it was just about almost a year we were together, and I got the call from the Middle East saying, no, okay, Dad's coughed up the money, you can come over now. So it was a very frantic goodbye. I mean, my heart was breaking and so was his. And I wanted to show my grandkids that, you can go through all this stuff, you can go through separation, you can go through all sorts of things. But when there's real love there, it wins. It really does. Don't listen to what other people tell you to do. Do what your heart says. And really that's the theme of the book, I suppose, if there's a theme to it. So anyway, I got back over to Aden, and my mum loved parties. So she threw a party because I was about to be 17 in a week. 17. And my mum, and Dad as well, but they loved different cultures. So when they moved to Aden, which is now capital of Yemen, I think, when they moved there, they wanted to know the local people. They weren't interested in the Europeans there so much. So Mum made friends with Adenese, and some pretty high-powered Adenese at that. There was the chief of police, minister of this, wonderful poets and artists. So when she threw this party for me, I knew nobody there, so they were all her friends. And I could not believe the gifts, but perhaps one of the most interesting gifts was hiring Ahmed bin Ahmed Qasim, he was a pop star in the Middle East. I'd left England's absolutely adoring, so many of them. Roy Orbison was one of the favourites, and so on. And when I heard Arabic music for the first time, I thought, oh, ye gods, I can never get used to this. All these quarter tones. Where's Roy Orbison and Billy Fury and all the people I loved? I had them on little 45 RPM discs. Anyway, so party happened, and Ahmed was invited to sing. And he'd come with his band, and it was such a coup to get this famous Adenese singer. And he had written a song for me and I was very embarrassed. I said, "Oh, lovely, how nice." And I thought, how am I going to pretend to like this? Because the music didn't do anything for me. Anyway, it started off, and like most Arab music, it started off quite slowly and then suddenly broke into this cadence of, really wild music. And I flung my shoes off and I started dancing at my party. And I just could feel the music right up through my bones and loved it at that time. I don't say I was an instant convert. I wasn't, but that song particularly was lovely. Anyway, I guess I must have looked pretty good at 17 and dancing like a sprite, because Ahmed turned up again the next day and said, could I go out for lunch with him? Okay, fine, I said, so off we went. And he was the quintessential star. People would come up to the table at the restaurant. I'd never had any experience like this. And, and he'd say, oh, no, I'm too busy, go away. But he really loved it. He loved all that attention. Anyway, one thing led to another. I went to see their rehearsals, and at the rehearsals I danced. And that's when his band said, you know what, she'd be good on the stage at our shows. And that's when I was asked to go on the stage.
That is so important for your grandchildren to know. I 100% agree, because as what young people now, yes, they're doing their TikToks and their Facebooks and their Reels and things like that. And that is entrusting really that video to a server. Let's just put it that way. Unless you're downloading the video and putting it in your own drive and hoping that it never goes away, because that's kind of how today's youth is writing their story. And for you to share that story in writing and you're verbalizing it, I can picture it like anybody's business. And that your children is kind of go, wow, grandma was pretty like hot stuff once upon a time. She like went in circles that I only wish that I could get in those circles these days. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was good. And I really wanted to show them, because one of my grandchildren has the same syndrome. So she has a problem balancing already, and it's going to get worse. But I wanted to show her what you can do. So actually, it's going to be more about that coming in book 2, but that'll be next year. So, and as I say, I always wanted to show her about love, because when we first met, Chris and I were teenagers. Nobody really took it seriously. When I got back to England from Aden, I was in Aden a year. We had to go back to England because Dad got fired from his job because he couldn't seem to control this daughter who was appearing half naked in front of the Arab men. My God. So anyway, we went back to England, and I realized at that point, this had all been this incredible dream. And I'd written Chris the Dear Chris letter, this is not going to work. But we got back in touch again. People gave us 6 months. And here we are. In January, we'll celebrate 58 years married. So, yeah.
Wow.
Believe me, we're as surprised as anybody.
That's beautiful. So I'm going to get you to grab your book and show everybody the front cover of your book, please. And you mentioned before we started that the inside cover is how you'd like to read that out, please.
Sure. Got to put my glasses on. As I said,
I understand that completely.
Okay.
What a fantastic cover.
Now, those are photos of us. That really is Christopher at 12 years old.
Oh.
In his
no wonder your dad couldn't control you. Look at you.
I don't look like that now, but and that's me at 17. Now, we're not that age difference. It's just that those are two pivotal things in our lives, you know.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So, what would you like? The back? These were some of the reviews, or do you want my?
Let's read like that. The inside, you said the inside cover of the book is the story about the book. And then we'll read a
Yes.
couple of reviews on the back. This is just fascinating. We need to do this. And while Christine is getting herself prepped up and ready, I put out to the world. I was having a conversation today, Christine, with another fellow who's going to be January the 10th, 2023. He's coming on to share his book. And I was saying, we need to share these stories. We need to support each other in our creativity, whatever that is. If you're like when you were around the artists at the Jazz and Arts Festival, and just being around our like-minded people and encouraging each other, making space to talk books or art or music or pottery or running or whatever your creative outlet is, we have to support each other. So just remember that out there when you're rewatching this somewhere sometime.
And certainly people like me appreciate what you're doing to do that, to support us. It's wonderful. So in my introduction.
Oh, perfect.
So I've got why the choir boy and the belly dancer, because that's what we were for a short time back in the recesses of our memories, and of course at different times in our youth. Yet these are the roles that defined us. The belly dancer's joints are shot and she uses a walker, and not just because her left hip has been replaced. I know, because she is me, and even I find it hard to believe the memories at times. The choir boy is in relatively good health. He had a minor heart attack a few years back, but nothing that a couple of stents didn't fix. And yes, the joints could be a tad more flexible, but he can still swing a club on the golf course. At this writing, we're both halfway through our 8th decade. We were born in England just 6 months apart. He in July, me in December. War was raging. It was 1943. A tangled web of events brought us together at 16 years old, and we've been together ever since. Over 60 years, give or take a year here and a year there, when we took time out. Not bad for a couple whose friends and relatives gave the marriage 6 months at best. Now we're well into a new century, a new millennium, and when we laugh together, which is frequently, we feel like those teenagers again. Time has a way of rendering even fraught experiences bearable, often laughable, and this older, later love is tempered with acceptance, tolerance, respect for each other's independence, and, occasionally, ebullience of the sort experienced by aircraft passengers coming into land after a turbulent, bumpy ride. These are our stories, spanning romances and adventures until we settled in Canada and a home of our own. Sometimes life seemed like a roller coaster ride. Occasionally it went smoothly, as if that roller coaster was coming into home dock. I hope you enjoy our tales as much as we have enjoyed living them.
Oh, that is so magical. So before we get to the back cover, Christine, so from the time that you said, okay, Christopher, got to grab a pen, got to put my fingers to a typewriter, however you wrote the book, from the time that you made the decision to take pen to paper to the time that you opened up the box and you went, here it's here. What was that timeline like?
The timeline was unbelievably long, and it was thanks to COVID that I finally got it done. I probably started picking around at it about 5 years ago when my youngest granddaughter was 14, and I thought, yeah, I got to show her what can be done with life, you know. And of course, the memories such a slippery thing. Christopher would say, no, it wasn't like, yes, it was. No, it wasn't. And that was, 5 years ago, and then I'd drop it. And at first I wasn't even dreaming of publishing it. It was just going to be for the grandkids, and I was just going to do a little sort of a Staples special or something like that.
Hmm.
And then as I was telling friends part of what I'd written, they were going, "Oh my God, that's a book. No, we want to read it." And then now I do have writing in my background, because one of the things I fell into was journalism
Hmm.
in Canada. So again, that's book two. No educate, not well, very scrappy education anyway. So, but it all worked out, serendipity, Jeanette. I
Yeah,
mean, life is so full of it, and you just got to be open to it,
absolutely. And
recognize it.
those that know my family, my dad had an angel and his angel's name was Serendipity. So that's fun. That's very fun and touching for me to hear that word, because I haven't heard that word in a long time. So all of a
Yeah.
sudden I'm channeling my dad. My dad is just so
Oh,
pleased that I'm doing this for authors in the community. So before I get you to read a couple of reviews off the bat, it begs the question now, because you keep saying you've done this for your grandchildren. What do your grandchildren think of this book?
well, Jordan absolutely loves it. She was amazed. But my son, he called me up. He said, "Okay, I've just finished the book, Mum. I got tear in my eyes," he said, "but I have to tell you, he was with a friend. Now, these are, quote, kids in their late 40s, right? And his friend is married to somebody who works in the service, a guy who's, I don't know what he does, something a bit hush hush, I think. Anyway, they were around there together having dinner or something. And they talked about their parents, as we do at that
Mhm.
age. And Leon told them something about my book, doing quite well. And he mentioned the title, The Choirboy and the Belly Dancer. And friend's husband turned around and said, "Your mum wrote that?" Leon said, "Yeah, do you know about it?" He said, "Yes, he was enjoying Bill Bryson's Stories from a Small Island, I think it's called.
Mhm.
Sorry, Bill, I hope I've got the title right. Um, and he was talking about it, and his friend at work said, "Oh, if you liked that, you'll love The Choirboy and the Belly Dancer." I
Wow.
know. Wow, with W
Whoa,
W.
whoa, whoa.
I know. I was just blown away. That was the best review I had.
Oh,
I mean, I'm such a fan of Bill Bryson.
oh my goodness. So, we're
Hmm.
not going to read the reviews. I'm going to be a little bit ad lib here because we're getting close to a little bit of time here. From what you know about your book and people that have purchased your book, can you tell me kind of three people that you think this book would make a good gift for? I love this question.
Yeah, I think anybody who's into true romances, that would be
Okay.
one. Um, I think somebody who's interested, because there's quite a bit in here about post-war Britain and what it was like to grow up with
Okay.
rationing and this and that and the other. So anybody who's interested in war stories as well, and well, obviously memoir. Somebody who likes memoirs, and I know a lot of people who really just love reading real stories about
Mhm.
real people. So
I'm going to add from what I've just learned over this last half an hour. I'm going to suggest someone who has been an immigrant to this country.
yes,
I'm going to suggest that this book be given to a grandchild that's, say, going on to university, for them to understand family, for them always to remember family. And I'm going to suggest a career counselor, meaning, and the reason why I say that is you've had two very unique starting off to life, and where you were able to, I'm going to say deep in the book, and I know you're going to gift me the book because we live close and we'll make that happen. So thank you, is to be able to go, I started in life as X And this is where I've been able to go because I keep using love. I keep using love as the foundation to whatever I do in life. So I think a career counselor could maybe help somebody just understand that quirky start in life, that life will be good as long as you love what you do.
That's true. I would suggest the career counselor does not encourage a career in belly dancing.
There you go. There you go, career counselor.
Certainly in journalism and the travel writing that I was doing, when again serendipitously fell into it. So
beautiful. So the question that I will wrap up this with is, like I always ask my authors, is, so what words of wisdom do you have out to somebody who wants to write a book in the genre that you have done?
Don't be afraid to tell the truth. It really is, Jeanette, difficult when you come up to a rather sensitive point. I mean, even just, there are still little tender areas with Chris and I about the fact that we separated at that age, even those many years back, and why. So yes, don't be afraid to tell the truth. And if you think you're going to hurt somebody, change the name, or really, really weigh it up. What's the value there? Is it really worth hurting anybody or not?
Great advice. Great advice. So thank you so much, Christine, for sharing a half an hour of your amazing time in this incredible book that you have written to share out to the world. So I at this time, my closing remarks always are: grab a book, grab your favorite beverage, go find your favorite reading spot, tuck yourself in with a good reading light. It's getting a little darker these days. Take your mind, body, and spirit to someplace else through the words of somebody else that is written on the page. You'll be amazed at just where you can go on a journey with other people. Thank you again, everybody. I will be back next Tuesday night, either at 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock. I'm not sure. I can't remember now, with another edition of the MYBC Virtual Bookstore Author Series, where I bring people that are in the creative spirit connected to books and share their stories. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.